The secret to using Wikipedia is to keep using your own brain. Check the sources. Are they reliable? Checking out the talk page is also a good idea, as it allows you to find out what parts of the page have recently been edited or which parts are contentious. And to give Wikipedia credit, they do try to keep it factual. The main way to do this is with sources. Everything on Wikipedia needs a source. In theory, this is a sound plan. If there is a source, then there is proof, right? Sadly, this doesn't always work. Because what if there are no sources? What if a subject is based entirely on hot air? What do you do then? The problem with terms is that they are primarily created through cultural osmosis, and often don't have an origin. Certain words may be based on other words from ancient languages, but you can't really find proof that the term is correct, other than just pointing out a situation where the term was used by someone to refer to something. Luckily, this mostly doesn't matter. You may argue that the word apple is not a good term to refer to an apple, but you'd be pretty hard pressed to come up with evidence to prove that. If you want to refer to apples as blue cheese or something, that doesn't really change anything about the object it refers to. After all, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet.
Not if you call them
blue cheese. This isn't really the case for video game genre terms, however. These things are as volatile as they can be, which is also why the video game section of Wikipedia is filled with so much misinformation, which is also what makes it so interesting. I have done several videos on video game genres, and I said I was done with them, but they just keep pulling me back in, which is fine because I have a great story to share with you today. Now sit back and relax as I tell you about the term I came up with myself to describe the concept I'm going to call hot air terms. So, what is a hot air term? A hot air term is a term whose definition is either intentionally or unintentionally left vague in order for it to apply to whatever the person using the term wants, depending on what is convenient for them. The name of the term is often itself confusing and undescriptive of the concept it is supposed to refer to. Hot air terms are often created and controlled by a small group of people to give their opinions and tastes a greater sense of importance. There may be a core of truth in the term or concept, which could be useful if properly analyzed, but this is often discouraged by the users of the term, as to change the definition would conflict with their purpose for the term. Hot air terms are an incredibly useful propaganda tool, because there is no hard evidence to disprove any of the claims made about the term by the people who came up with it. What these terms mean is in large part a matter of opinion, right? Well, not exactly. There is a way to use logic and conceptualization to cut through the hot air and expose the truths, which is what I'm going to do today. I am going to cut through 4 hot air terms and expose their lies, and you're going to watch it. Also, it's important to note that there are many people in this world who don't care about clear terminology, science, and evidence, but they know that other people do value them, so they will make appeals to science to try and push their own narrative. Just look at flat earthers and how they use pseudoscience to try to appear scientific. This is why it's important to call out hot air terms, and why I will be giving Wikipedia some tips on how to inform people about these terms. To start out small, we've got role-playing. This is a really interesting case because this word is only a hot air term in the context of video games. If you look in the dictionary, you'll find an incredibly easy to understand concept. To pretend to be a particular character and to behave and react in the way that character would. Whoa, what an incredibly simple and logical definition. It sure would be a shame if this term were to turn into hot air. But that's exactly what happens the moment, the nanosecond, that this term enters the realm of video games. Its meaning becomes completely obscured and unclear. Suddenly, role-playing isn't about playing out a character, but it's about levels, magic, and experience points. The definition is so fake that it applies to 50% of all video games. Hell, the fake definition has even changed over time, as back in the NES era, people apparently thought that any game where you walk around towns and talk with people in a top-down perspective was a role-playing game, including games like Gargoyle's Quest and Star Tropics. I've already explained this before, but the way that the term RPG is used in video games is identical to how the term D&D-like would have been used, where any game that has mechanics in common with Dungeons & Dragons is an RPG. It's easy to understand that this mistake was made back then, but at this point there really is no excuse as to why we are still using it for games it doesn't apply to. Except many people don't want to stop using the term for their favorite games, as that would make those games look worse, or in particular, make its creators look foolish. Games like Final Fantasy VII, Persona 5 and Xenoblade really aren't about role-playing. They're about making numbers go up and watching anime cutscenes. The term anime skinnerbox, my creation, is a far more accurate term for these games, but it's also a much more negative term. So if fans had to choose, they'd rather go for the hot air term. Appearances are very important to these people. And that's a shame because it's not like any game that's an RPG is immediately superior. But as you will see in the rest of this video, the people who create and nourish these hot air terms very much want that to be the case. Because then they don't have to explain why their games are superior, they just are. A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet? Well, not according to these people. People will often defend terms like Metroidvania and roguelike with arguments like, well, if people want to know what that genre is like, they just have to Google the game it's named after. And, oh well, we'll just have to wait for a better term to come along. Both of these arguments are fallacies and don't actually hold up. First, if someone wants to know what a Metroidvania is, they are very unlikely to look up the games Metroid and Castlevania. In Castlevania's case, they'll even end up at the wrong game. They're far more likely to just look up the word Metroidvania, at which point they'll just end up on the Wikipedia page. And then it doesn't really matter what the name is, right? You could call it the pooply poop genre, and the information on the page would be the same, just with a different title. It's the same with roguelikes. If you Google rogue, you don't even get the game immediately. You get a bunch of other stuff first. Type in roguelike and you end up at the Wikipedia page again. Second, the problem with the term Metroidvania isn't just the name, but it's also the definition. The definition is unclear. Why is Hollow Knight a Metroidvania, while Dark Souls, Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2 aren't? They all have non-linear worlds with shortcuts, backtracking and progressive power-ups, right? Why don't we just define Metroid with well-established genres like platformer and shooter? The interconnected world is not a genre, but rather just a different approach to level design. The problem isn't just the word, the problem is the concept the word is trying to describe. How can you give a name to something you don't fully comprehend? I already did a video on the roguelike genre, but roguelike is such a good example of a hot air term that I just had to talk about it again. Let me take you through the history of this genre, and hopefully that will explain why this counts as a hat. First there was Rogue. Rogue was inspired by D&D, making it an RPG, which really means it's a D&D-like. And that really means it's a dungeon crawler with turn-based combat and a progression system. What made Rogue special was the combination of its permadeath and random dungeon generation, which is what most people understand to be the core of the roguelike genre, although I refer to it as the risk assessment genre. And that is important to point out, that Rogue did invent a new genre. Sure, roguelike is not a good name for it, but there is a core of truth here. But that's not why roguelike became a hot air term. Rogue became popular and people started to make games like it, which is what led to people considering it a new genre. And that's one thing I find really annoying. The notion that when there is a lot of something, then that thing must be a new genre. I actually came up with a phrase to describe this grievance. Taking 1,000 shits on Mount Olympus doesn't make shit-taking an Olympic sport. When something becomes popular, that doesn't mean that thing is itself a genre. There are hundreds of games inspired by Dark Souls, but Dark Souls itself is still just a 3D action combat platform progression third-person shooter etc game. But anyway, people wanted to come up with a genre name, or at least a small group of people on some random forum wanted to. And I'm not kidding here when I say that they chose the term roguelike because it was the least of all evils. Which doesn't sound like they were very sure. But in theory, this is fine. Rogue was Rogue, and games that were like Rogue were roguelikes. It's not perfect, but it's fine. But everything changed when the Berlin interpretation attacked. Now, I'm not going to paint these guys as the villains, but they did kind of mess things up. Although I do want to point out that these are once again just some guys. They can have their own opinion, but why is theirs displayed on Wikipedia like it's facts? Basically, what these guys did was come together to talk about their favorite games in Berlin. And there they tried to define the roguelike genre. They did this by putting all these games together, including Rogue, which means that Rogue itself was now a roguelike, and decided this was the canon of roguelikes. They then compared the features in these games and made a list. Each feature would give you points, and the more points a game had, the more it was a roguelike. Okay, first issue. According to this list, Rogue is not the most roguelike. Yes, seriously, Rogue does not get max points on the roguelike scale. Why? Well, because some of the other games had more in common with each other than with Rogue. Yeah, logically, Rogue should be the sole canon roguelike game, but it's not. Of course, it makes sense Rogue didn't get max points, because as a genre evolves and people figure out how to perfect its features, it changes. If you were to create a canon of modern risk assessment games, Rogue would get even less points. This is also why ASCII graphics are part of the list. Yes, the canon games have those graphics in common, but that's because they're old. It has nothing to do with the core genre. Again, I'm not trying to paint these guys as villains, but they did kind of start this culture of elitism around roguelikes. Because with this point system also came the concept of the roguelites, which are for little babies and not for real gamers. The concept of roguelite makes no sense either. On the one hand, it's supposed to apply to games that don't have true permadeath and aren't as hardcore as Rogue. But according to the list, that shouldn't even lose you that many points. Okay, let's say I make a game that follows the Berlin interpretation to the letter, it gets maximum points, it is more roguelike than any other game ever made, but then I decide, permadeath seems kind of punishing, let's completely remove it. Technically, that game would still have more points than most, if not all, of the other games. Or what if I were to do the reverse? Have almost no points except for procedural generation and the most hardcore permadeath ever. Would we describe that one as roguelite? This is what makes roguelike such a hot air term. The people that insist games like Slay the Spire are not true roguelikes don't think that for game design reasons, they think it for gatekeeping reasons. The term is just a tool to keep certain games out. Its fakeness is what allows them to do that. This creates a problem for Wikipedia, because it needs to create a page on roguelikes. It can't not make a page about it. People would just go somewhere else if that was the case. The problem is that they don't have any good sources. All they have are opinions. And yes, technically Wikipedia does mention that the definition is a point of contention, but it also never questions the validity of the term roguelike in the first place, and does heavily feature all of these opinions over the entire page. Which creates the implication that this is all fact. It's not intended that way, but that's how it comes across, and technically the sources are all correct. These opinions were set by the corresponding people, but there is no argument given as to why these people deserve to be featured this heavily. Why am I not referenced in this Wikipedia article? Is my opinion less valuable than these people? What authority do they have? At the top it says that roguelike is a subgenre of RPG. What source do they have on that? Yes, Rogue was inspired by D&D, but so was Colossal Cave Adventure. Are they saying that every roguelike is an RPG or a D&D-like? I'm not even saying that this information shouldn't be on the roguelike Wikipedia page. These are factually existing opinions, and they are useful in understanding people's motivations. I just think their information needs to be reframed so people know these are just opinions. The best way they can do that is by reframing this page not as a history and identification of roguelikes as a genre, since that claim in itself is contentious, but as roguelike as a term. By even calling it the roguelike genre, you are framing its status as a genre undisputable, which also leads people to read the page as fact. Again, the problem with hot air terms is both the name and the definition. This Wikipedia page only treats the definition as contentious. What cannot be disputed is roguelike as a term. By presenting it as a contentious term, it informs people that both the term and its definition are up for debate. The page will be used to document the history of the roguelike term, and as far as that goes, all the information on the page is correctly sourced, so you don't even have to remove anything. It's the perfect solution. The Immersive Sim hot air term is like a jacked up version of roguelike, as it is even less sensible and even more elitist. Even the Wikipedia page itself is just a complete mess. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this topic as I am actually planning on doing a complete takedown video on the entire Immersive Sim genre. Just know that this term sucks. In short, Immersive Sims are supposed to be games that give the player multiple ways to complete objectives. Immediately you notice that the definition and the name itself have nothing to do with each other. This is because the concept that immersive sims are describing is actually known as emergent gameplay. If you go to the Wikipedia page of emergent gameplay, you'll notice that it is 1000 times more coherent and actually understandable. So then why not just refer to immersive sim games as emergent games? Simple. Gatekeeping. The problem with emergent gameplay is that every game in the world is emergent in some way. Some more than others, but it's much more of a gradient. So a game like chess may have a lot of depth, but it isn't going to give players a lot of leeway when it comes to the game's mechanics. Meanwhile, Minecraft allows players to use redstone to create complex machinery, calculators, and even working 32-bit computers. And Dungeons & Dragons allows a player to do anything as long as the DM allows it.
The spell takes effect. It's as if he's working in slow motion.
I'll grab his stinger and try and stab him with it.
Roll the die. He's dead, killed by his own poison.
Immersive sim fans don't like this, however. Gradients don't allow you to gatekeep effectively. They want it to be a black and white definition that they can control. The first thing they try to do is define some mechanics a game should have to be an immersive sim. So Bioshock is one because you can electrocute enemies who stand in water, make enemies fight each other, and set traps. Problem is that you can also do this in Skyrim, which many immersive sim fans don't like, although some do.
Okay, I'm 90% positive you can use a torch here. Oh! It's an immersive sim! What did I tell you? Controversial take. This is gonna piss off somebody on Reddit.
So instead they pivoted so that immersive sims can only be made by certain studios. Seriously. Warren Spector is credited as the father of immersive sims, although he credits his colleague Doug Church with creating the term. I find this doesn't really matter since Warren is the one who talks about them the most, while his colleague doesn't seem to have that much to say on the topic. So Warren is basically the main source on the topic. But anyway, any game that Warren Spector is even remotely involved in is called an immersive sim. Or alternatively, any company that Warren Spector was a part of, or that claims they were inspired by the games that Warren Spector worked on, becomes an immersive sim company. I'm not going to go through the whole daisy chain, but to give an example, Arcane is considered an immersive sim studio because of Dishonored and Prey, but this also means that games like Deathloop and even Redfall are considered immersive sims or immersive sim adjacent, which just shows how arbitrary this term is. Arcane Studios was recently closed by Microsoft, which makes me wonder what happens when every immersive sim company goes under. Do immersive sims just stop existing? Or is that when the fanbase finally broadens the definition? According to Warren Spector, the first game to ever incorporate immersive sim elements is Ultima 6. Oh wait, it's actually Ultima Underworld. I guess I was mistaken. Okay, but Ultima Underworld inspired the Elder Scrolls. Why is that not an immersive sim then? Also, Ultima was inspired by D&D. So that means D&D is the first immersive sim, right? Oh wait, they actually compare immersive sims to playing Dungeons & Dragons. You know, I'm starting to think that even Warren Spector doesn't know what he's talking about. The best part is that emergent gameplay is one of the prerequisites of being a roguelike in the Berlin interpretation. Which isn't surprising because Rogue was literally inspired by D&D. Fucking end me. Sorry, I said I was going to keep this short. Let's move on to the Wikipedia page. One of the sources on this page actually does say that Skyrim is an immersive sim. What is the source? A random PC Gamer article. Not great evidence. Also, this article states that the Elder Scrolls only became immersive sims with the release of Oblivion. Look buddy, I don't like Morrowind either, but you're going to have to give at least one argument to support that claim. Actually, scratch that. Wikipedia, stop using random ass sources like this. Or at least tell us that it's just some guy's opinion. This is getting sad. The worst part though is that when I originally researched immersive sims a few months ago, they actually had a section talking about how one of the creators of Gone Home said the game was inspired by immersive sims. And they removed it because it was their opinion that Gone Home wasn't immersive sim because walking simulators aren't immersive sims. Okay, wait a minute. You'll post random opinions from PC Gamer, but this you delete? It doesn't matter if Gone Home is an immersive sim or not. It is a fact that dev said that he took inspiration from them. That is useful information, especially when it concerns hot air terms like this. You're free to include your opinion, but don't remove factual information. Besides, some rando decided to change the genre of immersive sims from action-adventure games to adventure simulation games. Which 1, every single immersive sim is an action game, 2, immersive sims aren't simulation games, and 3, Gone Home is an adventure game. This Wikipedia page is a tire fire. And now we come to the juiciest plum. Isekai. First off, I want you to forget everything you've been told about Isekai. Seriously, everything you've been told about this garbage genre is literally propaganda. In fact, I am the only person in the world who knows what's going on with this garbage. It is the ultimate hot air term. To prove that, all you have to do is look at the Wikipedia page on Isekai. Most of the sources on this page are anime companies like Crunchyroll and Anime News Network. Even the talk page talks about how these are all self-promotional. But this is again the problem. They don't have any other sources. Who can you trust when it comes to defining this term when the only people who watch Isekai have a vested interest in making Isekai look good? Me. I know everything about Isekai. This entire Wikipedia page should be rewritten by me. Now, how do I describe, as briefly as possible, what Isekai actually is? I can't. To properly explain what Isekai is requires its own video. Actually, it requires its own video series. But wait, super awesome Arpong, didn't you say that immersive sims were also going to need its own video? Yes. I am drowning in work. I am the only person who knows what's going on with immersive sims, with Isekai, and with so many other things. I need your help. I need your support on my Patreon, so I can make all of those videos. Your support is very well appreciated. However, I won't let you go without at least a little explanation about what Isekai actually is. I am going to create a new genre. Well, actually it has existed for decades, but I'm making it a formal genre. Escapism. Escapism stories, no, I don't mean stories that provide escapism, but stories that are about escapism, are most often fantasy-based, but not always. They involve a character escaping to another world or environment in search of excitement or to avoid responsibilities or problems. This is the basis of the escapism genre. However, there is a light and a dark side to it. This is the key difference between stories like Alice in Wonderland and Isekai. Isekai is part of the escapism genre, yes. Just because Isekai is shit doesn't mean that it doesn't have a genre. It needs to have one. Isekai fans want you to think that stories like Alice in Wonderland are Isekai because that will make Isekai look better. If you go around saying that you like Isekai, that will make it easier for them to pressure people to watch garbage. In that way, Isekai fans have the opposite goal that immersive sim and roguelike fans have, where they want to gatekeep their genres by applying unnecessary prerequisites. Isekai fans want as many stories as possible included in the Isekai genre, which is why their only prerequisite is that a story has to take place in another world. It has to be generic to include as many stories as possible. The moment you start gatekeeping by saying Isekai also have to include reincarnation or cheats or slimes, that's where stories people actually like will stop being Isekai. So what's the real difference? If you look on the Wikipedia page for escapism, it says, the Norwegian psychologist Frode Stenseng has presented a dualistic model of escapism in relation to different types of activity engagements. Stenseng argues that there exist two forms of escapism with different effective outcomes dependent on the motivational focus that lies behind the immersion in the activity. Escapism in the form of self-suppression stems from motives to run away from unpleasant thoughts, self-perceptions and emotions. whereas self-expansion stems from motives to gain positive experiences through the activity and to discover new aspects of self. I'm just going to refer to them as positive escapism and negative escapism. In positive escapist stories, characters only stay in the other world temporarily in order to recover from daily life, learn some kind of lesson, or grow and change as a person. In Alice in Wonderland, Alice is bored with her class, falls asleep and dreams of going to the exciting Wonderland. There she gets to have fun and stand up to an unreasonable authority figure. But when the dream turns into a nightmare, she wakes up in the real safe world. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy doesn't want her dog to be killed, so she runs away from home. She grows homesick quickly and spends the entirety of the story trying to get back home, finally being able to, with the magic words,
"There's no place like home."
Escapism can be positive or negative for different characters in the story. In Peter Pan, Wendy and her brothers have positive escapism. They get to enjoy Neverland, but end up returning to the real world to grow up. Peter Pan experiences negative escapism. He never wants to grow up, stays in Neverland, and thus chooses ignorance.
You changed. Not really.
Yes, you have, Wendy. Stop enabling him. Don't you know about Peter Pan syndrome? Isekai are about negative escapism. In Isekai, the characters don't return home. The idea isn't even brought up, because the people who write Isekai don't want temporary escapism. They want permanent escapism. This is also why lots of Isekai start out with the main character dying and reincarnating into the other world. It's a form of suicidal ideation. On top of that, the purpose of the character going to another world isn't to become a better person. It is the stark opposite. The sole purpose is for the author to live out their dark, twisted, and disgusting sexual power fantasies. They all start with a pity party about how tough the main character's life has been up to this point, which is supposed to justify them getting cheating powers and a harem of slime girls or something. They'll reincarnate as animals or objects for the express purpose of being able to spy on women in a hot spring. Sometimes they even reincarnate as children or in the bodies of children so they can relive their childhood or do other kinds of pedo-related activities. Fascism, misogyny, and general asshole behavior are all par for the course for Isekai protagonists. The entire point of Isekai is for these people to live out their darkest fantasies while at the same time being in complete denial over them. This is the tragic paradox of Isekai. They want to escape from their inadequacies, but they also don't want to admit that is what they're doing. This is why it's so important for them to convince you that Isekai is actually good. They need to spread propaganda, claiming that Isekai is smart and cultural. It's the only way to feel content in their self-suppression. The one show that showcases the concepts of positive and negative escapism better than any other is Amphibia. Anne, Sasha, and Marcy all go through escapism-themed character arcs. From the very start, Anne's goal was to go home. She never desired escapism, but she did need it. Being away from her friends allowed her to reevaluate their friendship, and her time with the Plantars taught her to be independent and stand up for herself. She truly grew and changed as a person. Her story is pure self-expansion. Sasha may not have wanted to go to Amphibia, but she didn't hate it either. She always felt comfortable in a position of power, and Amphibia gave her the opportunity to relish in it more than she ever had before. Her ultimate goal may have been to return home, but she would have gladly stayed if she had no other choice. This makes her story very similar to Fascism Isekai, where the main character gets to rule over an army and live out their ultimate power fantasy. But in time she realized that her friends were more important to her than power. She gave up on her escapist power fantasy and became an example of self-suppression turned self-expansion. Marcy is a weep, a fandom weep. She is the exact kind of person who would watch Isekai.
Gosh, this is just like the hero of my favorite game, Vagabondia Chronicles! The greatest JRPG of all time. Have you played it? Do you want to play it? Do you want to borrow it? Just say the word and I'll lend you my copy. Man, it'll change your lives!
She wanted to go to Amphibia, specifically to outrun her problems. She thought she could travel from world to world having endless adventures with her friends. That if she just kept running, none of her problems would ever be able to catch up to her. But you can't outrun yourself. She didn't want to lose her friends, but that's exactly what happened. It wasn't until she got trapped into a perfect world that she realized that struggle, hardship, and change are a part of life and are worth suffering through. Her story started out as hardcore self-suppression, but ultimately evolved into self-expansion. It is good to escape into another world as long as you don't stay there. If you do, the world you escape to will just become your new world. And when you want to escape that world, where will you go? At some point you have to accept that you can't run away from yourself, because your problems will follow you and you'll even get new problems. The only solution is to face them head on and solve them. There, how about that for a definition? Now take this whole section and plop it unedited onto the Isekai Wikipedia page. Source? Me. Isekai is the corrupted form of escapism. Its sole purpose is to let creeps live out their disturbing power fantasies. Isekai fans want you to think that Isekai is just traveling to other worlds, because the alternative makes them look bad. And that is why Isekai is a hot air term. Or at least it was until I defined it just now. Of course, Isekai being a word with an actual meaning in the Japanese dictionary does make it confusing, but that's not my problem. They should have thought about that themselves. As long as it's clear that Isekai is fucking shit. Oh, also, if you ever say or write something along the lines of got Isekai to another world, monkeys will come to your house and eat you. Ultimately, the problem with a lot of terms is that there is often a huge disparity between what they mean, what they should mean, and how they are used colloquially. My best advice for dealing with unclear terms is to first try to narrow the definition down to be as specific and well-defined as possible, and then ask if the name of the term used for that definition is logical and if it's necessary to even have a term for what you're trying to describe. Also, I'd advise doing some research to see if the thing you're trying to describe doesn't already have an existing term. But really, I also want to point out here how fast terms like this spread and how uncritically people start regurgitating them. The amount of people who heard the term isekai or roguelike for the first time and not only accepted it, but also started using it in common speech is immeasurable. People will hear these terms, not do any research themselves, and just accept them because they don't want to appear uncultured, thus normalizing these terms and playing right into the hands of the shills. Let's hope Wikipedia takes my suggestions extremely seriously and cleans up their act. And then pay me a whole bunch of money. Then again, I could just change them myself or get someone else to do it by complaining about it in the talk section. Actually, I might do that. Maybe I can even get them to use me as a source. Well, either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new today, and liked and subscribed and stuff like that. If you did, I hope a monkey comes to visit you in the middle of the night and give you a succulent, sloppy, wet kiss on your mouth.